thought this room was going to be empty with Sue in the other room, but thank you. So I'm here to answer a question, and that question is, how much marketing is enough? I think clearly this is a massively important question, and I'd like to start, if I may, with a story. So if we could just imagine that your friend is starting a business, and you're very happy for them because they're a good friend, and clearly you want them to do what they wish to. You've got experience, you say that you want to help. You clearly know that that means that they're going to ask you some questions. So they do, they ask you a question, but as soon as they start that question, you're instantly starting to sweat, because you know that there is one question that you most definitely do not want them to ask. And that question is, what should my marketing budget be? But they do. So you mumble and you stumble and you realise you don't know. You don't know, and you know you don't know, because you've been asking yourself the same question for the entire time that you've been in business. You might even pretend to know. You've probably been doing it for long enough that you probably even believe that you do, but you don't. But they've asked you the question, so you've got to give an answer, and you stumble out exactly what everyone does in this situation, and you say 10% of predicted revenue. But because they're your friend, they're intelligent, and they shove that off a little bit. So you rejig what you're saying, and you say 20% of your predicted profit. They ask you whether you're Mystic Meg and whether you brought your crystal ball with you, because quite clearly they don't know the answer to that question yet. You get the point. So why do we guess? This is one of the most important questions that we face in businesses, the answer to which gives us the amount of money that we're going to put aside to ensure that we bring business in, and as such ensure the success, or at least the survival of our business. So is there actually anything more important than the answer to that question? I think we guess because it's easy. Working out 10% of a predicted revenue figure that you've plucked out of thin air is definitely easy. It's definitely also very quick, but that's kind of a benefit, because at least if you're going to screw something up, you might as well do it quickly. You never know, you might get lucky as well, so there is that. But I think most importantly, it allows us to ignore a few things. Things like we don't know enough about our business, or that we know it's impossible to know the answer to that question, or that we know that those two things in themselves aren't ideal. Maybe it even allows us to ignore the fact that we're scared of the answer. I think most of all it's because we do know that there is a better way. And the first half of my little talk will be, hopefully, getting a better way of answering that question, both for yourself and if any of your friends come up and ask that in the future. We're going to need a few things. And the first thing is an understanding that this is just a better way. You can't work out an exact, perfect marketing budget because things change over the time that you use that budget. But as well as that, you're going to need a target turnover. So rather than a predicted revenue, you're looking for a target, because this marketing budget is what's going to help you achieve that budget, that target. Next up, you're going to need your gross profit margin, and that is literally just what's left, as you all probably know, after you've sold a product and deducted the cost of that product off of it, as shown in my lovely little diagram, which isn't as good as everyone else's so far. You also, the example figures, by the way, for both of those slides, we're going to use £500,000 target turnover and 45% profit margin, and then we're also just going to need an annual rent. We use that just because it's generally the biggest fixed cost, and we'd like to take some of those into account as well. In this example, we're going to use £30,000. So there shouldn't be any trouble so far, it's just three numbers, but no, good, excellent. So we move on to the interesting bits, and I think before we do that, I'm going to rattle through a couple of numbers which should be fairly simple, but just in case I do rattle through them and I lose you a little bit, I hope I don't, but we will revisit it and I'll make it slightly easier. But I wanted to show the groundwork of it. So the first thing we're going to do with those three figures is we're going to work out 12 to 15% of your target turnover as a range. So in this case, just 12 to 15% of a turnover of £500,000 is £60,000 and £75,000. The next thing you do is you work out your markup figure. So that is the profit margin from earlier expressed as a percentage of the cost. So in our particular example, obviously you've got the percentage of the percentage that the margin is of the cost. So to make that more clear, you've got our example of 45% divided by the 55% gives you 82% is your markup in this case. And then we're straight into the last step. So it's a 3-step process, and it's the budget itself. You simply times the figures from the range that we did in the first step by the markup to give us 49,000 to 61,500 in this case, and then you take the rent off for both of those figures. And it gives us a figure of 19,200 to 31,500 pounds in this particular example case. Point is that it takes into account a couple more things than just the target turnover. So we've got some confident figures, and they're relevant to your individual business, which is great. But I think we need to backtrack a little bit and look at some examples. I've given you one example, and it doesn't really make much sense without looking at some others. So the boxes on the next couple of slides represent different businesses. First slide, we're just going to keep the target turnover and the rent the same and just change the margin around. You can see wildly different budgets because those businesses are different. Quite similarly, if you just take differing rents, then the budgets differ wildly again. So each of those 8 businesses, or 9 if you include the main example, are in different situations because they're in different markets with different costs and profit margins, and as such their marketing budget should be different to achieve the target that they've set out. Don't forget that if we'd been lazy, every single one of those examples would have just been told £50,000 as their budget, because everyone defaults to that 10% revenue figure. But I know that was a lot of information, and as I kind of predicted, quite a few glazy eyes. So what I've done is I've written a little tool on the 56 website where you can just plug 3 figures in and it will do it all for you and tell you what your budget should be. So if you like the whole pen and paper approach, it should be all on your handout, but if not, 56.co.uk/budget calculator. And yeah, you can use them for your own figures, but if you're a bit geeky, I spent about an hour just plugging my own figures through it just to see how they all interact with each other. I think it's a fun way to finish a Friday afternoon. Anyway, now we've got those it's a better guess of a marketing budget to achieve a target turnover. Now what? We put the money to one side, and we know that we've got to do something with it, because it's not just going to make itself into that £500,000. So now for the difficult bit. Well, not really. I think what's happened is over the past 8 minutes or so, we've taken something that's probably oversimplified in business a lot and complicated it slightly. In this case, I think when you ask, how should I split my marketing budget, you'll get a different answer from every single person in this room and every business owner out there probably. Because there's this many business owners with this many different approaches to marketing, and as such there's a huge amount of different ways to split your marketing budget. What is static though is that there's several different channels that you can put your marketing budget into, but offline stuff, so your magazines, your radio ads, your TV ads, your online activities, which is where I spend my day, and SEO or blogging or any other content creation that you've heard about already. Then you've got events that you can come and advertise at and pimp your wares, or direct marketing in terms of salespeople or potentially leaflets or anything like that. And then, very importantly, market research to actually work out what your competitors are doing and what the market is for your product or service. So you can split your marketing budget across all of those channels, but how should you split them? You could do it like that, and it doesn't really matter which one of those are, or you could do it like this. And the point is that it doesn't really matter how you split your budget. The thing that does matter is that you cover all of the channels. So to make that more clear, I think of all businesses, my own clients, my friends' businesses, whatever, as a room. And each one of the doors into a room is a marketing channel. where people who like to interact with you through that channel will come in and potentially buy from you. If you shut any of those doors, those potential customers can't get into your business, and as such, they'll go somewhere else. So you have to keep all of the doors open. But once you've done that, what else? I've been told not to say vomit when this comes up, but I've just done it anyway. It's not vomit, it's breadcrumbs. You have to think Hansel and Gretel were using breadcrumbs to mark out where they've been from so that they can find their way back. It's kind of oversimplified the story, but the point is that we're going to evolve that slightly and say that every time you have a first interaction with a potential client, you're essentially giving them a handful of breadcrumbs and asking them to drop them the whole way through the process until they become a client. And the reason that you do that is because it's your job to track conversions. The customer has no real need to tell you where they've come from, how they found you, why they found you, or anything. You'll just happen to be there and make a sale to that customer. So you make that sale, which is great, but you clearly obviously want to do more. And to do that, you need to know some things. You need to know, when did you first interact with that customer? When did you last interact with them before they purchased? And how much was it worth? And by doing that, you're getting your data, and as such, you're going to be able to replicate exactly what you did so that you can turn that customer into more customers like him or her. Because it's a lot easier to replicate a sale than it is to invent a whole different sale, a whole different type of sale, as we know. And how do you do that? The computer's frozen, there we go. Vomit, breadcrumbs. So we need to track everything. We need to work out what these breadcrumbs are. And offline, that means phone numbers. It means lots of different phone numbers. It means different phone numbers for every piece of offline activity that you do. They're not expensive. You can buy virtual phone numbers, and I don't own any companies that sell virtual phone numbers, but they all ring on the same phone, but you get a report saying this phone number was called X amount of times, and this one was called Y amount of times, and you know the costs of each one of those adverts, and as such, you know what the ROI potentially is on those. But at the very least, you have more data than you had before. So a different phone number on everything you do. It also means discount codes. And once again, labouring the point, it means discount codes that are different on every piece of advertising that you do. Combine that with the different phone numbers as well, and you're starting to really gather some important data. And if you're strict with yourself and actually use that data, you can start to do the replication of sales. Now online, this stuff's easy, and I would say that because that's what I do, but every visitor to your website is giving you information that allows you to track a sale the whole way through the process. You probably, if you've got a website, which is likely, and if you attribute any worth to it, which is likely as well, you're probably using Google Analytics. Now that's not enough, you have to actually use it fully, and I'd say that probably 99% of the people in here aren't. So the options are learn how or pay someone else to do it, not pitch. But there's nothing more powerful than using the data that software like that can give you to allow you to replicate what you're doing well and improve what you're doing badly. So some simple things on Google Analytics like goal flow. This is an oversimplified example, but it shows that there's a contact form on this particular person's website. It was filled out 147 times in this, it was a month period that I did this for, and they can see that 100 of those contact form fill-outs were done originally from finding that business on Google, so they were searching for it. And that would come down to good rankings or whatever. You need to use other data to drill down a little bit further into that. But goal flows, you have to set up goals in Google Analytics so that you know exactly what your goals are and then where people are coming from to get to those goals. If you're selling something specifically online, then you probably already know about e-commerce tracking in Google Analytics, but are you actually looking at the sources and mediums that that business comes through? So looking in this case, Google cost per click, so Google AdWords stuff attributed to a huge amount of the sales that this business is doing. So Yeah, they can congratulate themselves for that, but they can also look at the other bits and pieces that should be doing a bit better. They've got organic stuff on there. I'd look at that and say they've got no social traffic coming through to the site, or at least no conversions coming through from social traffic. But they get that data, so they know their AdWords stuff is working well. Is it actually returning them more than they're spending on AdWords? And what can they do to improve that even further while bringing up some of the other channels as well? We can get quite geeky, glaze over for a second, and every link that you put anywhere on the internet, so in emails or on forums that are relevant to your brand or anything like that, you can put in extra data at the end of the link so that you're giving Google Analytics some data every time someone clicks on that particular link. So you can put a link like that on a newsletter, so that you can see exactly how many people clicked on that particular link rather than any of the other links in any newsletter. But the point is that there's loads more that you can do online. Scratching the surface. The kind of point that I'm trying to get across is that if you want to track it, which you should, any individual thing that you're doing, if you want to track it, you can. You just have to probably think of a creative way of doing that. How can you turn the journey that a customer's taking to your business into a trail of breadcrumbs, and as such separate those breadcrumbs into what works and what doesn't? So overall thing is that knowledge is power. The more data that you have, the better the decisions that you can make. The more you'll know, the less you'll assume, and yes, the better the decisions you'll make, and the more successful your marketing will be. On a selfish point, it allows you to create informed decisions. So when times get hard, a lot of people think of cutting costs, and the first thing they cut is their marketing, because it's generally quite an intangible cost that you can't tell the benefits of. If you're using all this data, if you're leaving breadcrumbs and you're analysing that, you won't be cutting your marketing budgets because you'll know exactly where your livelihood is coming from. And it allows you to change your marketing budget split, whatever it may be now, to something that is working better for you. So those aren't representative of what I think any businesses should do. It's just showing that marketing budget splits should change based on data. The important point there, as it's changed, is that this example hasn't shut any doors into the business. Yes, there's going to be channels to your business that work better than others, and yes, there's going to be some that work less well, but the point is to not cut the budget for underperforming areas. It's to work out what you're doing wrong, because those channels wouldn't exist unless they worked for someone. So work out what they're doing right and how you can involve your message in that channel to make it better for you. Because if you rely on one channel or a couple of channels, then what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for a potential failure if any of those channels stop working for you. We all know that we should spread our marketing budgets around. Running out of time, so we'll go. I think the whole point of every speaker here today is about actions. So we need actionable content. So I just want to recap. I think the actions that I would like everyone to do in this room should be fairly clear, but they're work out your marketing budget, a better guess of it. Use the tool if you want, but if you don't want to give me the traffic, don't. Open all of the doors into your business, and then once you've done that, track everything. Very simple. Most important point on any of those, though, if you don't listen to any of the other points, definitely listen to this. Use the data that you get. There's no point having the data unless you're actually going to use it in some way. One thing to remember throughout everything that you do marketing-wise is that there is no right answer. All you're doing is you're trying to get a better solution than the one you had before. And when you arrive there, you've got to look for the next better solution. My ethos in business, if you like, is I revolve around the word done. So if you've done something, then at least you've done something. It's very, very simple. It's better than sitting there working out what you're going to do. So making things done is generally a good thing, as long as you check that you've done them well and then do the next lot better. So that only leaves me to say good luck. I hope you enjoyed what you've heard. This has been my first time doing this. It's been very scary, so thank you all for not doing. And I'll welcome any questions. Thanks.